Hi guys, Happy New Year, hope you're doing really well. So in this video I'm going to give you some of my top tips on how to create cinematic wedding films.
Ladies and gents, the newlyweds, Mr. and Mrs. Scott!
So jumping into number one, and that is editing to the strengths of the wedding film. So I remember in the early days when I made a really good wedding film that would blow the couple away, I would then want to use that wedding film as a template for other films that I make in the future. And to be honest, it simply just doesn't work because every wedding is different and every couple is different. For example, you might have a really high energy wedding that has loads of really good dancing shots, and instead of just leaving yourself a few dancing shots towards the end because you have that as a standard template from a wedding before, construct a story that will actually allow you to use more of those dancing shots rather than just cutting them out just because you had a previous template of a really good wedding film that you did that only had wedding shots in towards the end. So another example could be that you have a really awesome grand ceremony, but then the reception was low key and the couple really wanted to focus more on the ceremony. So in that scenario, you really want to highlight that and you want to put more of that ceremony into their 5 or 6 minute film than say the reception, because instead of sticking to a standard template that only allows you a certain amount of time for the ceremony and then a certain amount of time for the cocktail hour, a certain amount of time for the dancing, play to the strength of the wedding. The strength of that wedding was the ceremony, so try to include more of that ceremony footage in than you normally would. So tip number 2 is to have a second shooter. So I can definitely film a wedding solo, no problem, done it a lot over the years, but I find that my wedding films are elevated even more when I have a second shooter with me, and especially someone who's really good and knows what they're doing. So firstly, it allows you to just focus on all the creative stuff during the day, all the creative shots that you really want to get for the highlights, rather than having to focus on all the wedding in general and all the general coverage that you need to get. You can put some of that onto your second shooter, and then you could just be the one with the eyes looking for creative shots. So it also allows you to get really cool second and third angles of all those moments that just happen once, such as the first dance, the confetti throwing, the first kiss, the ceremony processions. So having a second shooter also allows you to focus on just one side of the preps rather than having to jump in between bride and groom preps, which can be quite stressful. So usually when you have a second shooter, they will be with the groom and groomsmen, getting all the preparations for the morning. And then since the groom and groomsmen usually leave earlier for the wedding ceremony venue, that second shooter can then follow them, stay with them all the way up until the ceremony, getting all the footage of them. And for me, that works really well because then I can just focus on the bride, stay with her up until all those important moments, such as revealing to her bridesmaids, to her father, the dress, and it just takes a big stress off my mind. So another reason, and it's probably a bit less common than the other things that I'm talking about, but a lot of the time the officiant, the priest, whoever's conducting the ceremony, they can sometimes be quite difficult and only allow you one position during the ceremony. They're going to say to you either stay at the back or the front, and in that case obviously you want to get both angles, so you don't want to have to sacrifice one of those. So having a second shooter in that case can be really good because then you can just instruct them to either stay at the back or at the front, and then you can be in the other position, and that will just allow you to make sure you've got both angles covered without having to move, and it keeps everyone happy. And also it can just be nice to have someone with you throughout the day just to bounce ideas off of. They might give you a suggestion for a really good shot idea, and that's just something really cool to have because it just keeps you going creatively throughout the day. Tip number 3 is to do with audio, and audio is really important because it really enhances the visuals and brings back all the emotion of the day.
She was never going to be fully on time, was she?
So we got an ETA on the bride.
So it's really important if you're trying to create a awesome story of the day to use words from the day from the really important people just to glue the whole thing together. So examples of this could be stories about how they met or they might say words to each other on the day about how much they mean to each other, or it could just be some funny stories to do with both of them, proposal stories. These all work really, really well as background audio to try and get a sense of how much the couple mean to each other.
Hearing the tales of your love story for the last 11 years that I've known you both gave me nothing but hope, excitement, and faith in not only love, but that true princes really do exist. It's true.
So I made a couple of videos in the past talking about how I get good audio during the ceremony and the speeches, so I'll link that down in the description and up in the cards. And it's a little bit old, but I'm still using all those techniques today, so I think it's worth watching if you're not recording audio or you're struggling with getting audio on a wedding day. Tip number 4 is focusing on storytelling. So you might hear this a lot about telling a story, storytelling, all these things. What does it really mean? I think personally it's about finding a synergy between the visuals that you're capturing and also the audio. So a good example of this could be when the father of the bride saw his daughter in her dress for the first time and got really emotional, and he might be talking about this in his speech. Plus you have footage of this, you have good B-roll of this. So using those two together can really help tell the story better.
When Annalisa came downstairs at home this morning in her wedding dress, I must admit, she brought a tear, or many more, to my eye. Annalisa, you look absolutely stunning.
On a ship in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight, a broken internet connection, and the furthest from your heart keeper you could be, you told me, Babes, it doesn't matter where we are or what we're doing in life or how far apart we are in the world, I know one day I will marry that man. He is the one for me. Your love has travelled, your love has settled, your love is pure, your love is true. Best friends and lovers. Now here we are today, sharing this special moment. My babes, you were right. He is the one for you.
I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so excited to spend the rest of my life with you, looking at you and looking in the same direction.
Tip number 5 is not editing the wedding film in a linear way from start to finish. And this is a personal preference of mine. It's not something that everyone always agrees with, but in my opinion, I think highlights films are generally more engaging when they're not edited in a linear way from start to finish, and you can show moments from the end of the day at the beginning, or moments from the beginning of the day, in the middle. In my 7 years of editing wedding films, I've found that engagement of a wedding film is generally better when you can mix it up and keep the viewer on their toes a little bit. So for a few years now, what I've actually done is try to create a little intro into the film that includes all the best moments of the day, just to really get people excited about watching the rest of the video.
I love our life, everything we've done so far, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. It will be an adventure and a challenge, I'm sure. But with you by my side, I'm sure we can do anything. Not bad for a couple of kids from Clec, eh? Hey!
And then possibly going back to the beginning of the day, starting with the preps, and then not being afraid to mix it around, show some shots of bride and groom together early on in the film. Doesn't have to be later on the day when you actually filmed a portrait session, for example. Then moments from the ceremony, I usually spread them out throughout the film as well. I don't put all the ceremony in one little block of the film. I'll have maybe the ring exchange early on, and then later on the announcement of bride and groom are married, you may now kiss the bride. There's no hard and fast rule that it needs to be start at the beginning with preps, finish at the end with dancing. That's how I used to do it, but since I've stopped doing that and I've now started to edit in a more non-linear way, I've had better feedback and just generally more engagement. The final tip I want to talk about is lighting, and generally throughout a wedding day it's quite difficult to be carrying around a load of lights, even though as much as you'd like to light up every situation, every scenario, it's not feasible. So natural light is obviously the best friend. Try to look for natural light as much as you can through doors, windows, and placing your subjects there. The only time that I will try to bring out a light generally is during the dance floor time, where it might just be really dark or I just need to make things to look a little less flat, so I'll just bring out a light and put it up in the corner of the dance floor just to make the dance floor footage pop a little bit more. So having your bride and groom get ready close to a window or door where the natural light is coming in, and you can turn off the interior lights, is going to look much better than if you just have them in the middle of a room with the overhead lights on. That's just a fact. It's just going to look way, way better. So always try to encourage them to do that. The light quality is just a lot better, and you're just going to get a lot more softer natural light, and the fall off of the shadows on the face or into the background is just going to give you a more three-dimensional image rather than just having everything lit by a few fluorescent overhead lights. Other than that, it can be really hard to control the lighting on a wedding day, so you just need to know the areas that you want to work with. So for example, during a bride and groom portrait session, you might have it at a time of day that's quite difficult sunlight, so then you're going to try to be looking for shadowy areas that are covered by trees, or inside perhaps that's out of the harsh sun, and that will just make the lighting a little bit easier to work with, a bit softer rather than having harsh light on them. If you do have a scenario where the light is really strong and really high up above sunlight, always try to make sure that the sun is not directly in the face of the bride and groom and it's actually behind them, backlighting them, because that's just going to look a lot better and it's going to allow them to keep their eyes open, obviously. Other times that you really want to make sure you're focusing on light is classic golden hour, for example, having a really nice soft golden hour. This is the best lighting time of the day, and generally any position that you point your camera in, the lighting's going to look really good, either backlit silhouette or even with the light in front of them, because it's a lot lower and softer. It's not going to be blinding them as much, and it's going to have that golden quality to the light as well, which is going to make them look really good. Okay guys, that's it for part 1. I'm going to make a follow-up part 2, which is going to go through some more tips that I have. I don't want this video to be crazy long, so I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. And yeah, other than that, make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks very much.